In 2012, I met Mary Magdalene. I had believed in her for a long time, but being in her presence was entirely unexpected. And the way she spoke was beyond anything I'd ever known. Quickly, leading me through thoughts and changes in focus in a manner I didn't even know was possible. Memory after memory, shards of my own mind, reminding me of decisions and hopes that I'd laid into existence without fully putting them to rest. She helped me weed myself. And at the end of this time, she told me to go home and have a family. A year later, I met my wife. As it so happens, my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, had grown up on the Sea of Galilee, about 20 miles from the town of Magdala. In the kibbutz that she had been raised in, I met one of the closest to her from her childhood. And she looked at me with a piercing gaze that just spoke of knowing, and told me how close we were to Mary Magdalene's home. The gaze went straight into my heart, and I was so excited to visit. The next day we went. It's a little town. It's only been uncovered, since early in this millennium. They were carefully excavating many different foundations, and that was all that was left, but it was profound. There were tile mosaics, very beautiful present. The care that went into them was still vibrantly here for us to feel. And there was a sacred site off to the side called a mikvah. There were several, actually. There were submerged pools where people would enter ritualistically to cleanse themselves in spiritual ceremony. I was haunted by it. To my surprise, I was allowed to walk right into one of them. And as I leaned down as if I was submerging myself, I submerged. As we drove home, we passed by what was known as the Mount, overlooking the Sea of Galilee, where Christ gave his Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. My family asked if I wanted to stop, and I looked up at it, and I was so struck that I said no. I had seen that hill. As a child, I imagined the same speech, and I saw the real place where it had occurred in my mind. When I looked up at it, it was inescapable. Thousands of years, not having altered it much, apparently. Deeply aware of these feelings and this transcendent introduction to a window into another world, we returned. That night, I was woken shortly after falling asleep by a presence. She invited me to enter the mikveh again. I was not in my body. My consciousness so present with her in a world beyond place, or location. And yet the choice to enter it worked. I shifted from a state of lucid dreaming to a transcendent experience beyond physicality entirely. A morphing of time and space, a bending of reality. It felt like a nihilistic death of what I'd known. And as I emerged from it, nothing was the same. I fell asleep. And it happened again. Awake, as clearly as I could understand it. I've had lucid dreams, and this was something more in a way. This time it was both easier and more frightening because I knew I'd come through it, and yet I knew what it entailed. I don't remember what happened after that time. Out again, and then awake again. Perhaps hours in between, perhaps 5 minutes, I do not know. But the third time, I was scared. Really scared. But I did it anyway, and I was more present, like going into a fire in which I was melting and yet more aware of myself in the experience for longer. My mind lasted more, and yet it did dissolve away. And as I emerged the third time, I was in a different place. I could hear so much talking. I could see it in a way like waves, a combination of visuals and morphic fields. It was somehow in relation to geography and yet transcending it. As I focused on a particular source of intensity, I could recognize personalities and then usually one louder voice. I could hear them conversing with each other, and they seemed to be very aware of each other. And they were people. There was nothing seemingly distant about their existence. And I slowly accept the dawning awareness that this was a world in which the higher selves of many beings remain continuously conscious of each other. I gazed out in awe in every direction, realizing that more people here seemed to be aware of this existence and presence. It was an initiation, and it left me with the trust to transcend into this space. For years since then, I've done so. I've always wanted a clearer explanation of what this is, why it works as it does. One would suppose that higher selves are higher, and yet these beings argue, they fight, they seem to retain almost a degree of aggression or malevolence. It's tempered by the sense that it's not actually physical. They don't hit or kill, but they're moving the same forces that generate violence in our world. And yesterday, I asked, the reply, you are to know this space that you may lead people out of it, To awaken into your body is to integrate that part of our consciousness that has existed here. It is not a dream time. It is fully awake, and yet it is divorced from the body, playing the body, pulling the body like a puppet master of sorts. Yet ineffectively, haphazardly, messages often not connecting or going awry. And this higher self attempts to move forces, and the conscious being ends up moving in a different way entirely. It is our job to call these parts of ourself into the presence of our body now. To unify, and in our unity, in this awareness, to enable a deeper way of loving, to make use of the ability to digest aggressions and leave them smaller, less pronounced, and less capable of affecting violence and aggression in the world. It is our job to unify these parts of ourself, and to do so we must pass through the terrors of some form of initiation, a death of who you have been. I've done this. I am on the other side of this. Your invitation is to be open to it. When you are called, be ready.